One of the biggest strengths of the world of darkness, and of urban fantasy as a genre, is how it adapts ancient tropes and myths into the modern day. Feudal vampire lords become tech moguls, werewolves patrol Central Park in their violent crusade, and powerful wizards use computers and iPhones to hack the planet. But the modern day isn't the only time period to get this treatment. The World of Darkness titles have a number of historical spin-offs, spanning everything from the First World War, to the Dark Ages, to the good old Wyld West. For the next two videos, we're going to be taking a look at the historical World of Darkness. Today we'll be going over the three unique settings for Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf the Apocalypse, and Mage the Ascension, while the next video will focus exclusively on the Dark Age titles. Yeah, sorry Wraith the Oblivion fans, that game is a pretty big blind spot for me when it comes to lore. I'll try and revisit it at some point, but for now, I'm sticking to what I know. Two very important disclaimers before we get started. First, the World of Darkness was primarily created by a bunch of white Swedish dudes in the 90s, so there's a lot of subtle, and let's be frank, overt, racism in these early sourcebooks. I tried to keep most of that out of this video, but given that we'll be covering the heights of both British imperialism and westward expansion in America, it'll inevitably crop up. Secondly, there is the case of werewolf, and the name of one of the werewolf tribes indigenous to America. I don't fully understand the context behind the name, but I know it's very offensive for non-native peoples to use the name, and quite frankly, that should be enough for anyone not to use it. So, in future content, whenever I refer to that tribe, I'll be calling them their nickname of Younger Brother, in this podcast and in future videos. Well, now that the trigger warnings are out of the way, let's get started with the earliest historical game in the timeline. Mage the Sorcerers Crusade covers the 14th, 15th, and 16th centuries. The Renaissance is in full swing, and as art, religion, and science begin to change in ways never before seen, magic and occult beliefs are falling by the wayside. Many of the awakened have started to ask themselves, were we wrong? Have there been solid, reasonable explanations for what we can do, what we are? And if so, what does that mean for the rest of the world? If awakened magic is something that can be studied, its effects reliably replicated, then even the unawakened could reap the benefits of it. But not every awakened will worker thought this was a good thing. If the unawakened world can practice magic on their own, they won't need us, and then what is our place in this new world? Thus, the lines were drawn in the sand, between those who believe that, given the opportunity, the awakened have the responsibility to aid those less fortunate, and those who think that the unawakened are stinky doo-doo heads who need to stop taking my welfare! Okay, that's maybe a little unfair. Maybe, just a little. See, around the same time, awakened of every kind encountered difficulty casting spells that, only a few decades ago, would have been a walk in the park. When these effects were successfully executed, reality itself seemed to resist them, causing bouts of dissociation at best, and hauntings by malevolent spirits at worst. This phenomena, which was then dubbed as Scourge, would eventually grow and evolve into what we in the modern nights know as Paradox. Taking a look at the various magical arts. Okay, there are 17 arts in the Sorcerers Crusade, and this video is long enough as it is. I'm not really going to go over the Council of Nine, since even though some of their members go by different names, the Cult of Ecstasy were the Seers of Kronos, the Euthanatoi were the Chakravanti, and the Celestial Chorus were French. They're the same traditions you know and love from the modern game, with two exceptions. The Al-i-Batin, correspondence mages who acted as assassins and couriers until the 20th century, and the Solificati, perfectionist alchemists and matter mages who, fun fact, also helped found the Order of Reason, before betraying them and helping found the Council, and then betraying them. Honestly, they should have learned at this point. And because that betrayal happened so early in the Council's history, I think like 7 years after the Council was founded, that would mean that for almost 400 years, the Council of Nine mystic traditions had 8 traditions. Similarly, the Order of Reason has a lot of familiar faces to the technocracy operating under different names. We have the Seafaring Void Seekers and the Star-Charting Celestial Masters as the predecessors to the Spacefaring Void Engineers, the financiers of the High Guild that would become the Arcane Crime Syndicate of the Syndicate, the Divine Artificers that would become the Engineers of Iteration X, the Moral Crusaders of the Cabal of Pure Thought that predates the Social Manipulators of the New World Order. These guys need to work on their branding. And the Mad Biologists of the Hippocratic Circle who would go on to inspire 1,000 drone kinks as the progenitors. The only really unfamiliar faces are those of the Seraphei, that is my pronunciation and I'm sticking to it, who acted as enforcers and assassins for the Order, and didn't officially exist. According to the White Wolf Wiki, which is not the most reliable source of information admittedly, they would quietly leave the Order of Reason in the 18th century, then eventually join the Order of Hermes as House Janissary. There are 2 last tiny details before we jump forward in time. Firstly, technology. The modern technocracy is often depicted as a sort of sci-fi organization, producing teleporters, dimension-hopping spaceships, ray guns, and cyborg super soldiers. In the Sorcerers Crusade, it's advised that the Order of Reason, or really any mage who invents things, only be able to create technology that is 200 years or less ahead of its time. So you can have an artificer wielding a hand cannon, but not a Tommy gun. I mean, according to the book anyway. I mean, your table, your rules. The second is the subject of avatars, the spirit that makes the awakened awake, I guess. In the modern knights, a mage's avatar, or a technocrat's genius if you want to be technical and an asshole no one likes, will often communicate to them in the forms of spirits, or dreams, or Red Bull-induced sugar comas. Yes, I actually wrote this in one of my mage characters' backstories, don't ask. In the Sorcerers Crusade, an avatar, which is called the demon, with an A because of course it is, this is the same game that spelled magic with a K in early editions, is far less subtle. Demons are less inclined to show you a vision of a great mountain with a shining light at the top representing all your ambitions, and more likely to just go, "Hey dickhead, become better at magic." So, have fun role-playing that game, masters. So, basically, the Sorcerer's Crusade flips the script on Mage the Ascension, showing the humble humanitarian origins of the Techno-Fascist Union, and laying the groundwork for the iron-fisted traditions to become the modern-day underdogs. Play it if you prefer steampunk to cyberpunk, or prefer the fiery version of the Ascension War to the dying embers of it that remain in the modern knights. Jumping forward about 400 years and 5,000 miles, we arrive in Werewolf the Wyld West. The Holy War against Apocalypse has brought the Garu to the American West. Or, if we're being honest, the Garu have brought the Holy War to the West. See, for the past 1,000 or so years, while the indigenous werewolves of America had have their run-ins with the worm, they've largely been successful in holding them off. But, with the recent colonization efforts by white Europeans, an enemy once thought dead has been awoken. The Storm Eater. Now the Umbra is deathly silent, save for a distant storm that seems to draw nearer and nearer with each passing night. Thanks, Europe. Westward expansion has proven to be a surprisingly divisive issue for the Garu. While many of them see colonization as a tool to oppress the spirits of the wild, many more insist that, for their mortal kin to live fulfilling lives, they must grow their civilization, even if it means the assimilation or destruction of indigenous cultures. And of course there are the outright racists, like the Fianna, the Get of Fenris, the Silverfangs, and the Iron Riders, the predecessors to the Glasswalkers. The indigenous tribes of the Uktena and Younger Brother are pretty royally pissed and largely shun their European counterparts, and rightfully so, for being honest. There have been attempts by the Black Furies, the Children of Gaia, and the Bone Gnawers to work out peace deals between the two factions, but after so many betrayals by the European Garu, the indigenous tribes have simply stopped showing up to these peace meetings because, I mean, they're not gonna do anything. Surprisingly enough, the genocidal, human-hating Red Talons have a not terrible relationship with the indigenous Garu. Oh sure, they still hate native humans, but they're not the ones who are tearing down forests and hunting wolves. So they have a pretty decent relationship with the indigenous people. The Stargazers also show incredible deference to the native Garu, since they care little for imperialism and wish only to wipe out the threats of the Storm Eater. And the Silent Striders are also there. But wait, it's not just their fellow werewolves the European Garu have managed to piss off. That's right, it's the Fera, the non-werewolf shapeshifters that have always had a testy relationship with the Garu, considering the whole near-total genocide thing a couple centuries back. While the werewolves, were-coyotes, and werebears of America have had a decent working relationship, that all ended when the European werewolves arrived and started being European all over the place. So, yeah. While werewolves in the Wyld West sounds like a lot of fun, you have to remember that werewolves are fundamentally devoted to the preservation of nature, and that colonization was fundamentally devoted to the destruction of nature. So play this game if you want a truly depressing Western experience, stripped of all the glitz and glamour, where you're most likely the asshole. Well, that was depressing. I know what'll cheer us up. Vampire the Masquerade, even in the modern nights, is already pretty Victorian. I mean, it's called Gothic punk for a reason. So the birthplace of Gothic horror was a natural fit when it came time for the Kindred's turn on the Wayback Machine. Neither the back alleys nor the ballrooms, the prince nor the pauper, are safe from the predations of the Kindred. And it's really where we start to see modern vampire society take shape. As is to be expected at the height of British imperialism, the Camarilla are sitting real pretty right about now. With London as its crown jewel, the Ivory Tower spreads its quote-unquote civilizing influence to all corners of the globe. In addition to adopting their nationalism and blatant racism, the Camarilla have also taken on the stiff upper lip of English society. A vampire is expected to know his place and is swiftly punished for trying to be anything but what society tells him to be. But it's not just the youngsters who have to watch their manners. Princes are no longer the land-grabbing, dictatorial feudal lords of centuries past, but instead shrewd negotiators, more than willing to respect the domains of their neighbors. After all, stealing land from foreigners is our duty. Stealing land from fellow Englishmen is just rude. Plus, holding domain over a city is far easier than having to watch a whole kingdom. In a real sense, these are the first modern princes like we see today. Most of the individual Camarilla clans are doing pretty well for themselves too. The Ventrue and the Toreador are both thriving, as is to be expected, but this era also sees the Tremere and Malkavians holding real power for the first time since the Camarilla was founded. The Nosferatu and Gangrel might not live in the fanciest of mansions, but that's never been their style anyway. They're perfectly content to be left alone, patrolling the fringes of polite society. The Bruja, though, they're in a weird position, halfway through their transition from philosopher kings to rabble-rousing punks. And yeah, while the Ventrue have found success as academics and merchant kings, they do still miss being actual kings and aren't afraid to bitch and moan about it in front of the entire Elysium. Woohoo. The Sabaton independent clans are pointedly less stable. Probably the most well-off are the La Sombra, who are in a similar position to the Ventrue, but in comparison, thrive on being underestimated. Other than them, it's kind of a mixed bag. On one hand, you have the Ministry and Banu Hakim, who are kind of just doing their own thing, with the Ministry latching on to that Jekyll and Hyde repression like a fly at a fly convention, and the Banu Hakim vibe-checking the unworthy, mostly undisturbed. On the other hand, the Zamitsi are being forced to watch their homelands defiled by the English, and their secrets exposed by some Irish Teddy Roosevelt-looking motherfucker. The Giovanni are still crouched under the couch and hiss when we try and get them out, and the Ravnos... Nope, still not ready to talk about the Ravnos, but it's safe to say they're not doing okay. Overall, the Victorian Age of Vampirism, which is what I should call my next album, is defined by contrasts: rich and poor, feast and famine, beast and man. Play it if you love the melodramatic parts of Vampire, where illicit meetings are held during operas Palpatine style, and the world is so grim and shitty that it wraps right back around to being comical. So, that's it. We've covered 3 games around a span of 500 years, and what did we learn? The road to techno-fascism is paved with dope steampunk flying machines. Nobody likes werewolves, especially not other werewolves. And even when the Ventrue are winning, they're losing. Just what they deserve. Come back next time, where, hopefully, since we're staying within one period of time, my workload will be much lighter. Wait, how many Dark Age games are there again? Motherfucker.